Hey, everybody. Before we get started, I want to thank my friends at Hatch for producing this episode. You can get unlimited podcast editing and strategy for one flat rate by visiting hatch.fm. All right, let's get into the show. Welcome to Distribution First, the show where we flip content marketing on its head and focus on what happens after you hit publish. Each week, I share playbooks, motivations, stories, and strategies to help you repurpose and distribute your content because you deserve to get the most out of everything you create. Super excited to be here with three of my favorite content folks that I got to bring on. So thanks for RevGenius for hosting this. Thanks for letting them kind of handpick who I wanted to chat with for this topic, which is obviously content marketing trends for 2024. So real high level, before we kick off, things we're going to cover, which obviously we're going to try our best to cruise through every single one of these things, but all based around key sort of trends that we're all seeing in the content marketing landscape. Mainly being, we're going to hit some of those key trends. We're going to talk about kind of how to execute a strategy or how we're executing strategies using some of those trends or trying to implement some of those trends. And then how we can obviously be able to create content, but also distribute, repurpose, share that stuff. And then some of the tools that we're using to help make everything more efficient. So we're going to get rolling with the key trends to start. So I'm going to kick it over to Jess. What is a key trend that everyone can't afford to miss right now?
So something that we're really investing heavily in at Island is doubling down on our customers and customer voice of customer, and not just in collecting like testimonials or, making sure we have some sort of, video that we're doing with them. We're really working on promoting our customers and getting them on the podcasts that make sense for their industry, getting them in the publications that make sense for their role. So getting them out there and talking about the cool things they're doing as a chief information officer at an enterprise company to, modernize and make a business impact in terms of the tools and processes they're using. And Island just happens to be a part of that story. So really letting them speak for us in a way that like maybe goes above and beyond what most marketers have done traditionally in kind of owning the content, but really getting them out there in like earned spaces in a big way.
That's super interesting. The idea, I was talking with somebody about this yesterday and it kind of like blew their mind as far as like using customers. I was like, you know what? I've got an idea for you. Tell me, like, how did you even come up with that idea? Like, I've literally never heard anybody say like, let's get our customers on podcasts.
Yeah. Well, it was sort of a thing of convenience, honestly, because we have some big name customers and, our product is one that offers productivity and access to apps and things like that. We're an enterprise browser, but we also have a big security play and people get really nervous to talk about what they're doing with security, right? And rightfully so. I mean, if you say the right thing, you're basically just laying out a footprint for how you can be attacked. So we wanted to do it in a way where our customers felt really comfortable, but they were able to share a story and show the really interesting things they're doing themselves that don't necessarily use Island. And so we happened upon this really great partnership with a podcast host that we're working on getting some customers onto. And so it just kind of like made sense. We're able to get these couple of spots on this podcast. And rather than having someone from our company go and talk, it felt better to have our customers go and speak. We're going to be able to reach a much larger audience in multiple different industries. And it just felt like a better fit to have them talk about us rather than us talk about us. It really like was an aha moment. Like, let's do this with everything. Let's not let this podcast be the last thing we do this with.
So two things are coming to my mind. One, how do you choose customers? Like, are you just choosing the biggest, the ones with the biggest audience? We'll start there.
Yeah, let's start there. So I kind of laid out this giant spreadsheet of like the heavy hitters. And I wanted to make sure we were getting a good cross section of different industries. So kind of started by organizing by industry and then kind of rated them on likelihood of getting a yes, just based on what we've done with them or heard from them in the past. And I'm just going to go down that list. I'm at the top 3 right now. I've gotten 1 yes. And so now I'm working my way down that list. I have backups for each of them. If one of them says no, I know exactly who I'm going to next. So really just laid out a plan for like, how are we going to get these folks on this show? And then make sure that that wasn't the only ask. I don't want this to be a one-off. I have other things that I would love for them to do. I'd love to do a video. I'd love to have their logo on our website. All of those things. So kind of packaging it in a way that feels like a bigger program.
Yeah, and it's an easy sort of maybe first foot in the door there, right?
Yeah.
Like start building up that relationship with them. So
Absolutely.
love it. Leverage customers within your marketing. But I think what I love about Jess's approach there is do it in a unique way that isn't just the standard like, hey, let's go do another case study. Let's do something a little bit interesting. How can we integrate our customers into the content that we're doing, make them the stars of the show, all that good stuff. So Chelsea, what are you seeing as far as trends in 2024?
Yeah. So I love Jess's approach of focusing on the customer in that way. And it kind of relates to my hypothesis or theory for the year around brand. So Jess's thoughts around like this customer advocacy is all about building trust, right? So my core thesis is that the challenges we face economically and within the digital landscape demand authenticity and distinct identities from brands. So essentially, brand, I think, is going to be the most important thing than ever this year for B2B especially. I think there are two core factors driving this. I think everyone is struggling with differentiation and trying to break through this like sea of sameness that we're talking about, right? I think some creative brand attempts, we're kind of seeing this right now, especially on LinkedIn, but we're also starting to see like copycat effects, which is interesting. And then secondly, buyers don't trust SaaS content. So there was actually a study last year from Organic Growth Marketing, I think is the org. They said that 12% of buyers said that software companies are the most trusted source of information. That's 12%, which is crazy. 55% of respondents said that content feels too similar. 60% of the respondents said that they place more trust in independent reviewers than company websites. So when I think about, trends for the year, I think brand is going to be a huge one that everyone kind of needs to invest in a lot more. So I can go a lot deeper than that, but that's fine.
We probably will go deeper on that. I'm curious, what are the steps that we can do to help make that shift? Some of it might tie back into Jess's, right? Like using people outside the company to be able to influence with the brand overall. But what are some of the things we can do within our companies to help build a brand? And I think brand building can be super squishy sometimes. Like marketers love to talk about brand building, and then as soon as it like gets to a level up, it's like, no, we're not. We got to do these things to get performance going. So how do you balance that?
Yeah, I think luckily we have some great examples to potentially help make that case when maybe it is like a squishy topic with like the C-suite. That was David Cancel's play at Drift like years and years ago. We look at like Gong, we look at HubSpot. They made the case of focusing on brand to differentiate themselves in the market. So this isn't necessarily novel, but I think in B2B, we've absolutely gotten away from this focus and also what it means to build a brand. It's not a logo. It's not your colors. It's not your website. It's an alignment of activities and tactics across the entire organization. So I think in order to kind of build that trust with people, you have to go back to your foundation of brand. And that's like, why do we do what we do? Who do we do it for? What's like the promised land that we offer our customers? So a lot of this too, it's like brand can maybe to a certain extent be synonymous with or like interwoven with strategic narrative work. We know everything that Andy Raskin preaches. So it's like, that's the promised land approach that like, what are we promising our customers? And the core of it is like, what's our ethos and what's the point of it? Some companies have this. So it is like a lot of internal investment, whether it's monetary, it's time, it's resources. That to me is like the foundation of a lot of brands' issues. They're all trying to do different things, or you're just like your post today, Justin, just kind of like doing the same old things. Well, it's like we have to kind of reevaluate like who we are as a company and why are we doing this? And then when you really hone in on that, and it doesn't have to be an expensive thing that you outsource, but when you really hone in on that, then you're able to express it across the org. So to answer your question, it is like finding somebody to kind of advocate for that. That typically tends to be a content marketer or a CMO or someone on the marketing team to really like raise their hand and say, let's reevaluate this internally. There are brand workshops that you can do. There are definitely like low lift. Well, I shouldn't say low lift because it is like time intensive because you want to be thoughtful about these things. But if somebody feels like, hey, like we need to get a little more clear in our brand, there are a myriad of great brand workshops. You can literally just Google online. There are a few brand thought leaders out there who offer frameworks where you can just kind of start to have like a committee internally. Tends to be a good way. Like, let's think about who are the most important stakeholders across the org to really speak on the brand. Ideally, you want someone, at least one representative from each function. And then you start to think about like the story of your company. And then you can dissect that really granularly to think about how do we express it and what does it look like across every function. What do we say on the website, but then how does that come across within CS, in support, in sales, in creating alignment there?
Yeah, brand is a huge task. It's way more than just a marketing department or 3 marketers on the team to build a brand. So it's a lot of work, but it's well worth it. Ryan, why don't you wrap us up here a little bit with the trend that you're seeing?
Yeah, so like everyone else, I'm pretty bullish on brand always, but especially in 2024. And I think a nice bridge from what Chelsea was saying is like companies are, willing to do the same old thing again and again and again. And, like the definition of insanity is doing the same thing, expecting different results. But the funny thing is on the flip side, they should be saying the same things that resonate over and over again, and they won't because they feel it's boring. So it's like we need to switch those and say less things better more often and do new things to get those core strategic messages out, right? So I don't have to tell anyone here in the chat or on the panel that like AI is a trend in 2024. And I think a lot of people are really trying to like, quote unquote, skate where the puck is going on AI. And like, I've got to be honest, I'm not sure Sam Altman knows exactly where that puck is going to land. So like, I certainly have no idea. And so I'm applying AI and I'm using these things and I'm keeping up with the news, but I'm trying to think of like, what are the second order effects of what's happening now? And I think there's a lot of different ways that it can go and still end up at a second order effect of like output becomes easier, volume becomes easier, right? And so what does that mean for us, like as content marketers? I think the quality becomes more important, both for resonating with an audience that's dealing with more and more noise, pulling that signal out for them. Also, even in like search, I think we're going to see in the next 6 months, people who find less copy and paste ways to do AI, but still really lean on the volume and quantity approach. We'll see like initial results and we'll post the case studies and everyone will be like hearing from their VP of marketing, like, why aren't we spinning up 300 AI posts? But I do think that Google's going to have to overcorrect. And I actually think it's interesting. Like my theory is that Google's going to finally have to really overcorrect and enforce some of these things it's been saying about EEAT, about reader value. Because if you're trying to rank content right now on Google, you know that plenty of people don't do those things and still rank. And it makes you wonder, like, what are they actually rewarding? I do think they're going to have to like move more in that direction. And even like at the beginning of my time at Gorgeous, which was like, I joined in December of 2021 and in the beginning of 2022, we were really quality focused. And I had friends at other companies being like, you're not publishing fast enough. Or like, for the same amount of effort, you could do more posts at an acceptable quality than what you're doing now. And we didn't get to the entire like backlog of initial posts that were there when I started. And so we got hit by Helpful Content 1. And we thought maybe that's why, like we weren't going fast enough or whatever else. But then we really doubled down on the quality strategy. We figured out a faster way to get quality posts on the URLs that were still there. And when Helpful Content 2 happened and everyone got absolutely annihilated, or at least a lot of people that I saw, we went way up. Like we had 4x traffic growth at Gorgeous in 2023. And so I do think, there's like this cliche that moving toward this like reader value that Google is always trying to capture, you shouldn't have to worry about core updates. Like to them, I would say there's historically a lot of collateral damage that says you should absolutely worry about core updates. But I do think that the core idea is right, where if you do things that create good content for your readers, over time, the arc of history will kind of bend in your favor. And even with product development, features are already not a moat, but with AI, they're going to become even less of a moat. And so I'm really interested in looking at companies like Todoist, where they're flexible as software, but you have to use it in a certain way. They have a POV on how it should be done. And I think when all the software starts to blend together and the marketing programs for those software start to blend together, having that really clear POV that comes through from your product to your individual thought leadership, to your company blog, to when you show up at events and speak. That's what people are going to gravitate to. And I think they're going to gravitate even more when everything else is reducing to the mean between AI and just like best practices and everything else.
And what you just described, that's brand.
Yeah.
And a good story. And
Yeah. And I agree that it's brand. The reason I went and zoomed in a little bit more is because like for me specifically, I'll only speak for myself. I have been guilty of like, we need to do more brand. Let's do brand. And VP and CEO here, like, I don't know, design. I don't know because they're their mind when they hear brand, but it's not like strategic narrative. And so I think focusing on like, we need a strong POV, we need a consistent POV, we need higher quality thinking on this. And like, honestly, the hardest one, which is like, we need to do less things better because there's this like cliche of more with less that VPs are giving us again and again. And the way they're using it is like, we need to do more things and get more revenue with less headcount and resources. So people get frustrated and like, I understand, same. But I do think that there's something in the more is less. And it is, and I'll talk about this more when we talk about like content strategy, but the content marketing power law, you get most of your results from only a few blogs, articles, initiatives, whatever. And so this idea of like big bang blog model where it just continues to expand out forever, I don't think it ever was really a good play, but it's especially not now. And I see a lot of people losing track of those programs and not knowing what they have to work with. And I think that's a loss.
Totally. I can't get out of here without giving my trend that I see. So I'm going to be very fast with my trend, but I think, and it ties, because I can plan these things, ties perfectly in with all what you guys think. Mine is play offense versus defense. And it sounds so easy to do, but boy, is that hard. But I think the companies and the teams who play offense and do things a little bit different, and it doesn't take much differentiation. That was one thing I learned when I was at Metadata. It doesn't take a lot. We just did enough things a little bit different, and you can really start to stand out that way. So that would be one where I think where everyone's trying to zag, or zig one way, you got to try to zag the other way. Awesome. So let's talk about some execution on this stuff in terms of all those things. How do we actually start to see some tangible results out of these trends and out of these key areas that we're supposed to focus around, whether it's brand, story, et cetera? Like, how do we build up a strategic plan both for the short term and the long term around these things? Jess, I'll kick it to you.
Sure. The most important thing to me is to go back to like, what is the story my brand is trying to tell? Then I can understand how I'm going to execute against us telling that story. So for instance, the customer advocacy or treating our customers as like rock stars and getting them out there to talk about themselves as much as they talk about us. The story we needed to tell, because enterprise browser is a brand new category. No one really knows what it is. There's a big kind of education piece and awareness piece that I'm really tasked with. And the idea was like, we need people to understand this is real and that it can actually do something really big for your business. And we can say that all day long, but people are only going to believe that it actually is a real thing and not just like a pie in the sky idea if our customers are out there talking about what it's done for them. And so once we kind of got that story down that like we need it to be real, and in order for people to believe it needs to be real, it needs to come from customers, it was very easy to know what to do next and what that kind of looks like in execution. And so the things that I'm going to be looking at in terms of like measurement for that are branded search, like making sure that just continues to grow, that like more and more people know what Island is. And then maybe the longer tail branded search. So like, are people searching Island, enterprise browser, Island, and then like related terms that we want to be known for? I kind of want to take a look at that, as well as kind of what's the attribution like in discovery calls, like people actually saying where they heard about us or in the form, right? So those are the kind of things I'm looking at.
Totally. I think being able to balance that too, short term, long term, to be able to show some of the things that we're tracking, like to have some hard numbers, helps support that long term initiative that you're trying to actually build up, especially when you're talking about story, brand, all that good stuff. Chelsea, let's go to you and kind of talk about how you're thinking about executing on this stuff.
Yeah. So I'd love to share a sample of a tactic that we ran last year when the marketing team at Lavender was kind of first getting going. I think this is a story that's probably relatable to a lot of people if you're kind of entering a new role or a company that like you kind of have to build from the ground up, or even like don't have a whole lot to work with. And it all kind of maps back to brand, right? Like to me, brand isn't something you go do. It's the foundation that gives you the direction of what to do and how to do it and what it sounds like and looks like. So for us at Lavender, that was creating helpful, informative, creative, engaging content. That was like the crux of it, right? Like we're not going to write for algorithms or SEO. Like we just focused on creating tactical, helpful content for our audience of sellers. So for us, what we did is we created just like a master list in a spreadsheet of topic ideas. And then we plotted that on a calendar. So it was like one topic per week. And then each person across the marketing team executed content. I said execute. I hate that word. We created content. It's just got a bad connotation. We created content about each topic, in video, short form, long form content like blogs, as well as LinkedIn posts. So we had a number of people internally who had audiences, who were content creators, influencers, whatever word you want to use. So we created just like a myriad of different types of content about that same topic. And within a week, we distributed it in our newsletter. And then each of the people on our team was also a distribution engine. So that tactic allowed us to create probably like a quarter's worth of content. And then from there, you'll love this, Justin, we were able to repurpose, recycle, redistribute all of that content. I would take a video, turn it into a different type of article, with a different angle, vice versa. Like I would just take the script. And then Aiken, who is our video person, he would take an article, turn it, like create his own spin on it with a video. And then you can slice and dice all of that into short video clips for every social media platform. And just that approach enabled us to just go hard at like creating a lot of content. And then we had like a wealth of this gold mine to kind of like keep recreating. And then we're able to learn from that, right? So qualitatively, we had so many learnings that really enabled us to like know what worked and what didn't, and also what people wanted. I create content just based off of what people tell me they want to hear. And that tends to work pretty well. So that was really successful. So hopefully that's helpful for people out there.
Love that. Yeah. Not starting with a giant keyword list and trying to just bang through that, but actually figure out what questions does your audience have. And then I love the idea of picking sort of a theme for that week and then building out a plan around that, because that helps drive that consistency there with the overall message. So Ryan, anything here? Do you want to jump to the next one and just tie it back with what we've got coming?
So I have something to say on this one, but then the next question I will be quick on because I think they're really related for me. So essentially, Janessa Lance wrote a blog in 2016 called Barbells, Not Treadmills, which is like one of my favorite content on content Hall of Fame pieces of all time. And basically her idea, which back then was quite innovative, now everyone or a lot of people do it, so it's a little bit different. But basically, she was saying instead of being on this content treadmill of a blog or 2 blogs or 3 blogs a week, build this like big cornerstone piece, which will sound familiar to anyone that follows Justin. And then on the other side of the barbell, do all of this atomized content, the webinars, the blog posts, the PR, the social posts. From that, basically use it to fuel your content strategy, right? And like I said, Justin talks about this every day now. So like it's still alive and well and it works. Where I am shifting my thinking around it a little bit is like, instead of having report and atomized content on the ends of the barbell, it's more like major POVs of your company. What are the hills you're willing to die on? And then on the other end, it's like, what are all of the like specific ideas, use cases, how-tos, whatever that ladder up that balance the other side of the barbell. And so instead of doing this like make big thing and then repurpose into small things, I actually really love Justin's model of like cornerstone content, core content, and cut content. But where I would differ even from like some of the stuff Justin recommends is like him and Janessa both are like, make the big thing and work from there. What I've seen happen with a lot of companies is that they spend a lot of time making this thing. There's not a lot of feedback loops. So they go really far in one direction that they're not 100% sure about. And it also delays all of this smaller content because they're waiting to make it until they have the big thing, right? Whereas I would almost start teasing the ideas and seeing if there's resonance on social and then build up. And so to use Justin's model, I think if you have the cornerstone, the large piece, the core model, which is like your blogs regularly and your cut content that would be on social, I think you can start at anywhere on that hierarchy. And I think you can move up and down one at a time. I'm not saying you could never go from cornerstone to cut, but I think it works best when you move one of those levels up and down at a time. And then I think from there, it provides a lot of opportunity to like make sure that what you're saying is resonating, have a constant feedback loop. And then again, yeah, like when you have done the posts and you've done the core posts and this really resonates, go and do the research, go and do the thing that you know how to build because you've been hearing all these feedback loops. And then, of course, yes, then repurpose it down. That should be like 6 months of content. Even if it's not all you post, you should be revisiting it and resharing it. And again, people don't want to say the things that they are bored of hearing. But when you get bored, your audience is now just finally clicking because they're not seeing every post. I see every one of Justin's posts. I have his bell rung on LinkedIn, and I still am not tired of hearing the way he says the same thing in different and new ways. So you just need to say it way more than you think you need to say it, I think is like my bottom line there.
Ryan's trying to get me fired up over here. Yeah, no, I'm totally there. And actually that's something I've been working with clients through a lot, as well as flipping the model and to validate ideas on social first, and actually validating what a lot of people would spend lots of time to create very tippy top of funnel POV type driven content. You can spend 1/10 of the time, or probably way less than that, to create a LinkedIn post and maybe an email than you can to, all right, what am I going to write about this blog and do all this stuff? So I'm right there with you on that.
This feels really important and like super practical that people can like turn around and use tomorrow. So can we spend like 2 minutes here? Because I would love to hear everyone on this group here talk about like, what does it look like when one little social post gets traction? Because I think a lot of startups have relatively small social audiences. And so it's kind of like, is that a big enough group of people? It's not really a scientific test. Like, just like 2 thoughts real quick. Yeah, Chelsea, go for it.
I have a thought.
Yeah.
So I love this analogy that somebody once told me about qualitative content, where if you have like 10 people in a room and the door's locked, you don't need 10 people to tell you the door's locked. You know what I mean? Like 2 people will tell you the door's locked. So it's like, even if it's just a few people, I think audience size, because that's a great point, right? Like sample size. I think even sample size of like a couple people rather than like 100 people, if you're not a big brand, I think it's still so valuable.
Yeah.
If you send a newsletter and you typically don't get any responses, and then you send a newsletter and you get 3, you probably hit on something.
Yeah.
If you send a LinkedIn post and you typically don't get a lot of comments, and then you send one and you get 5, you've probably hit on something.
There
so
you
again,
go.
it doesn't have to be 10,000 impressions, especially with algorithms today. You're probably more beneficial to get that small sample size. And again, you didn't put much time in it. If you're doing a LinkedIn post, the ROI is massive. So it's like, all right, I'm just going to try this again next week. That's my feedback.
Yeah. Yep. Positive and negative responses. Like if someone's dissenting or sharing it or tagging. So I love when somebody like tags somebody else. That means like it's kind of like a lazy way to share it. But then you can add that person into your audience. So I think the positive and negative sentiment reactions is also valuable.
What Justin said, I want to break it into 2 pieces, right? So there's like the incremental aspect and then like the actually resonant and responding aspect, right? So, to Jess's point, you don't have to go viral. And honestly, like, I actually don't even know if I would say like, okay, someone's post or like the company's LinkedIn post went viral. That's a resonant idea. Because if it's just getting a lot of likes and a bunch of like AI comments, like, great idea, that is helpful. I don't know if that's really resonance, right? Like you hit the algorithm the right way that day, but like, are you getting more actual engagement, right? So like LinkedIn does get this right on their algorithm. Liking, interacting with the post, or like, with the emojis doesn't really do as much as like actually commenting and sending a longer comment and spending more time on the post and more dialogue in the comments. So I think it's less like this is taking off and reaching an audience and more like people care about this. And to Chelsea's point, do they care because they're mad, or do they care because they're stoked and they're mind blown? Because I actually would argue that like with nuance, be careful with this, but like people disagreeing to me is a positive KPI on thought leadership. If you don't have people disagreeing, you didn't do thought leadership. You shared like a common opinion. It's not even a hot take. It's just like a take. It's like Google is important to startups. Like, looking at the more qualitative aspects, not even on the post, like, having someone reach out and like, hey, I've been reading your content for a while. This one really hit. Or like, I love behavior change as kind of an unquantifiable KPI. Like the fact that I'm, looking at Justin's content, I've actually changed something I did in content based on a post from everyone on this panel. And to me, that is like the biggest, even if it's a small shift, that's like the biggest form of resonance to me. I saw this, I paid attention, I trusted what you said, and I applied it, and it worked. So now I'm going to listen to everything you say after this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're trying to move on from this section, but I just want to mention one really quick thing. Because if you have all of this right, how do you track it so that you're able to actually take action on it? How do you remember? Are you going to remember that this one post from last week about X topic got 5 responses? And when you're trying to come up with fill your content calendar, So I think even just tracking it in a simple way, I literally just have a doc that's bookmarked. I know I'm talking with my hands so much. It's bookmarked in my Chrome browser. And that's where I drop all of it. So organizing it by topic. And I just think that's an important call out of if we're going to talk about the importance of feedback loops, you need to organize it and track it in a way that you can actually remember and take action on it. And it can be simple. That's one of those things that can seem overwhelming or how do I start? Do I put this in Asana? What do I do? You can just start super simple and just make sure you're tracking it so that you don't wish that you had done that when it's too late.
So good.
And don't underestimate vibes as a KPI for this type of
Vibes, yes. I'm only comped on vibes.
Right. Oh, wait. Is Lavender hiring? So, because the reason I'm saying this is so imagine Chelsea's model, right? You have a very simple spreadsheet or Airtable database or whatever. You should have a notes section. I'm not joking. Put the vibes there. This felt really resonant. I feel like people were more engaged, et cetera, et cetera. You can obviously track quantifiable metrics that get at some of this, but some of the most resonant turning points and building Gorgeous's POV were literally all of us just being I feel like that hit. Did you feel like that hit? I feel like that hit. You know what I mean? Without having to really justify what metric was.
And having that tracking is, man, I was going to say ammunition, but man, we're just going with the execution and the ammunition that we're going for today. You know what? But it's things you can use to make your case moving forward as you're having those conversations with execs or just other team members about, hey, this should be priority or this shouldn't. So I think having actual tracking, even if it's not maybe the traditional metrics or something like that, to say, look at all of these really good vibes we got on our post. You can see here, we're getting really good interaction. Nobody's gonna shy away from that. That's great. That's great content. And that's stuff people don't usually see either. So, all right, we're rolling. I want to make sure we got time for Q&A here. So I'm going to keep going here. We'll roll right into the next one, which is all about distribution repurposing. We've hit on it. I think there's a massive trend around, honestly, we touched on the doing more with less kind of with negative connotations. I think there's a massive trend of doing more with less on a positive connotation of holy smokes, content marketers now can create and do and distribute and repurpose so much more than we could even 2 years ago, just based on some of the toolings and some of the stuff that's out there. But we'll get rolling on this one. So Jess, I'll kind of kick it to you and kind of get you going on. How are you finding creative ways to get more done without burning yourself out?
I am very big right now on just going back and optimizing current stuff. So I'll interview somebody in-house that's an SME, and they'll say something and I'll, be recording it, of course, like the good marketer that I am. And I'll be that little clip right there is gold. And it relates to this blog post that, is a year old, but is still really valuable. And this kind of thing that this person said really hits the point home in that blog post. So I'm going to grab that clip and I'm going to jump in there and I'm going to, embed that because I think it makes so much sense. So everything that I'm doing right now is, one, I'm kind of new in this role, only been there about 5 months, still trying to get my head wrapped around the product. But anytime I hear something, I'm okay, I bet there's something out there we've already kind of talked about, but this thing we just talked about really bolsters that idea. So how can I optimize that piece of content with that idea or that video clip or whatever the case may be? So very big on just going back and making sure that what we currently have feels really robust and that we're not just creating a new piece because we heard something new on a topic that we've already talked about.
Amazing. Yeah, definitely. You can never go wrong updating old content for what? I mean, you can't. That stuff worked once for a reason and it can work again. You just have to kind of be able to put the time and effort into that.
Totally.
Chelsea, what's a tactic that you're kind of seeing and using as you're going about it in your work?
Yeah, mine's pretty simple and it relates to the tactic I shared earlier around mapping out some content themes. We did that last year. Now I'm part of a smaller marketing team. So I'm really thankful to former me for doing all of that. And we created such a bulk of content that now I'm able to, kind of similar to what Jess is doing and what I mentioned earlier, is we're able to see what worked, see what people what resonated with our audience, and then keep making more, essentially milking that content a little bit more and repurposing and slicing and dicing. So that makes my job a lot easier now, which is like another great reason why I think that's a great tactic, where now I can just leverage all of that, repurpose, make some more, maybe take the same topic and spin the angle a little bit. I also hired an agency, so they're focused on doing a lot of that. I set them up for success, and then I'm focusing on like deeper research-based content, which is going pretty well. So pretty simple.
Love that. Yeah. So you're focusing more on making sure the initial piece of content, high quality, hits the audience, all that stuff, and then allowing somebody else to come in and really like maximize that for you.
Yep. And apply their own spin and voice to it too, which I think helps.
Cool. Awesome.
Yep.
Ryan, what you got? You were going to tie into the last one, so I don't know if you hit on it or you got even more. Let's roll.
Yeah, so basically just thinking about this topic of repurposing, and there's been a lot of takes on LinkedIn, like y'all are repurposing things that should not be repurposed. And I do agree in a lot of cases. There's been a lot said about how to repurpose effectively. The one thing I would add is like repurposing is not just reskinning the same content for a new platform. You should be reusing this resonant idea, but creating content that is native for that platform that will resonate because the idea is resonant and you're writing it in a way that's engaging. I'm like thinking back to my days in like my reporting classes in journalism school in college. I studied PR, but we took a lot of the journalism classes. And my professor was like so hardcore on like, if it's not novel in some way, it is not news. Now, that doesn't mean it has to be new. It can be like an event is happening in a different way than last year, or there's some new element that is emotional or unexpected, or like basically breaks the banner blindness. But like event that happened last year is happening a year later is not a headline that anyone wants to read. And so I think if we accept that the means of repurposing are less important than choosing the right resonant ideas to repurpose, I think that model of newsworthiness is like a really good litmus. Obviously nuance beyond that, but if people are looking for a place to start, it has to be interesting, it has to be newsworthy, and most of the things people are repurposing are not.
Yeah, it's a real balance too. I think even with the like what you mentioned, with the blindness within a feed, or just within the, honestly, just the bombardment of content that like there's no shortage of content. Like you creating content is actually not all that impressive. Like there's tons of content out there. And so I think the idea when you're thinking about like distributing that content, repurposing that content, is like, how do you make that stand out uniquely where somebody is actually at, and you're competing against everything in your feed. So I this is a test that I like to do too, but it's like, if you're competing with the one above you and below you. And I think a lot of times, at least when you're talking about social, emails the same way. Like it's really easy for me to just check, delete. And it's really easy for me to just keep on scrolling. It's our job as marketers to figure out like, what's the one thing that I can do to make somebody just pause for a second to either read my subject line or be interested in what I'm talking about. And to your point, Ryan, like event is here. There's unique ways to be able to do that. And I think the smart marketers are being able to do that, but it's definitely not just like, let's throw this up and copy our landing page text over and call it a day.
Yeah, there's a lot of marketing cliches that marketers love to repeat and then ignore. Like I'm just as guilty as anyone else.
Sure.
One of them.
No clue what you're talking about.
You've got to listen to the customer. No, but I think one of the ones that really came to mind when you said that, Justin, was this like copywriting framework of the headline is to make them read the first sentence, second sentence, and so on and so on. And people will literally post that and send out an email newsletter where the first 3 sentences are about the thing that they want to sell. And I'm like, so when they said make them read the second, the third, etc., like it's supposed to be interesting to them, not to you, the person who gets paid off of this course. You know what I mean? So honestly, I'm really trying to get back to marketing fundamentals. I think we're too focused on the nuance of optimizing specific channels and forgetting why all of this works. Like, unfortunately, they did figure out most of this in the 60s, and it really hasn't changed much since. Like, you can still read, Influenced by Chialdi. You can still read Scientific Advertising and all of these books by the Madison Ave dudes. And like, they were annoying and wrong about many things, but advertising, they pretty much nailed. They had a lot of it pretty figured out.
Yeah. Psychology hasn't really changed. Humans are still pretty much the same.
And that's the most fundamental level, right? Like you can take tactics, fundamental back to strategy, fundamental back to marketing fundamentals. But people forget that the bottom fundamental of the pyramid is like people are incentivized and motivated to do things that make them feel better and they don't want to do things that make them feel worse. And that sounds stupid and it sounds obvious, but I could go down my LinkedIn feed and talk about how every single marketer is ignoring that basic fact, including me sometimes.
Yeah, there's science that backs it up. There's studies actually where it shows that we are more likely to avoid pain than move toward pleasure. So even though like the optimistic writer in me always wants to lean toward like positive copy or positive messaging, that actually doesn't tend to like resonate as strongly as like something negative, and always showing like what is the cost of inaction of not buying our product, and like what pain are we taking you away from. So there's definitely data and science to support that.
I'm with you, Chelsea. I'm like, oh, what's the positive? How can I make this more positive? I'm like, okay, I guess I gotta lean in there a little bit.
Yeah.
We did promise the folks a review of some of the tools we're using. So, I also promised the folks Q&A. So, and I'm going to make sure both happen. So let's roll through really, really quick, just some of the tools that we're using. Could be new ones, could be old favorites that we're kind of using as we move forward with content marketing, or just even honestly your work in general. Jess, I'll kick it off to you.
Okay, I'm going to do this so quick. Okay, I love Otter and Fathom for kind of capturing meeting notes, and both of those have great ways to synthesize those down into key takeaways with AI. I love Audio Pen is another great one. I'll drop all the names of these into the chat too, so that you have the spellings of them and everything. But Audio Pen is awesome for just like spewing out verbal thoughts, and then it kind of comes back to you with a very well-written paragraph of like what you just said, but smarter and nicer. Descript and Capsule for video editing are really like fun and easy for people who aren't video editors to become video editors. And good old Chat GPT, I pay for a subscription now. I actually built like an Island GPT, fed it information about Island, the product, our voice, our tone, what we do, our vision, boilerplate, all of that stuff. Anytime we have anything new, I add it, and it does a really good job. Not a perfect job, a really good job of giving me information back that I can then use to like write, or, you know, I'm going to edit this paragraph a bit, or it gives me an idea that I hadn't thought of before.
Love it. Chelsea, any that are sticking on your end?
Yeah, actually not too different than Jess. So I use Otter also. I tend to have like a lot of thoughts when I'm not in a space where I can actually like write them down. So I use it kind of similarly to kind of transcribe a lot of my random thoughts and ideas. That way I'm like writing from abundance. If I have to write from something, I've got like a whole bank of weird thoughts that I've had over the last month. I'm a big lover of Notion. I use Asana for project management and Notion for like all of my notes and capturing. I'm like, it's like makes those two things, especially together. Probably everyone's heard of them, but they make my life so much better and easier. And then I actually use a combination of Lavender plus Grammarly. Both of those tools help me just execute content better. Dang it, I used that word again. Write better. When I'm the only person doing content, even though I don't like really need Grammarly, like I don't think anyone else do it. It's actually kind of made me lazier sometimes, but it makes me so much more efficient because I don't have anyone else really editing or looking over things. So it's like a second pair of eyes on everything that I write. Lavender does the same. So same in a different way though. So I'm able to write just like really clean, concise copy. And shout out to the GPT thing that Jess mentioned. I did the same for our brand voice and tone, and it's incredible. And it can sound intimidating, like go build your own GPT, but anyone I think can do it. So I definitely recommend.
It's like uploading documents, honestly.
Yeah, it's
really
so fun.
Awesome. Ryan, what you got?
Yeah, Grammarly. It's funny you say that because I know a lot of people that are anti-Grammarly. I am anti-Grammarly, which is why I use it. It's my enemy that makes me stronger. I want to know the Grammarly suggestion, and I will take it or not take it, but with intention. It does catch things that I miss, but like you should be actively sparring, fighting with Grammarly if you're using it correctly, in my opinion. For my tools, if I was like running a new content team in-house, Letter Drop for sure, end-to-end, incredible ops platform. It was going to like, I mean, I bought it at the end at Gorgeous to replace even tools like ClearScope and things like that. Like it is really coming from a place of first principles because it's a team of engineers literally just asking what content people hate and then fixing it, which I think is so interesting because I would bring in all of my like baggage as a content marketer if I was creating content software. And then for my personal, since I'm not like on that level of tooling right now as a personal consultant, I'm running like everything through Airtable and Zapier, creating even like Airtable interfaces and things like that. Like it just makes it all connectable. Also like could do a whole nother session on like, I think ideas should be the base unit of a content program and not a blog article. And so I'm working out a way to do that in Airtable. And I haven't felt like it was possible until that software. I'm getting a lot more bullish on like whiteboarding software. So like Miro or Whimsical, even just like I literally have a pad of like 18 by 24 paper I got at the local craft store that I'm taping all over my walls and doing like a in-person Miro board, which I'm sure looks insane to any of my friends who come over. But I really find that it takes me out of the distraction of the computer and gives me the benefits of, I'm basically just using a whiteboard, like back to basics. But the ability, even for like briefs, I'm playing with like content briefs for blog articles, playing with what that looks like in Whimsical, this ability to like move outside of the boundaries of like a Google Docs page and connect things and repeat. And like, I think there's just like a lot there. If we're talking about these like POVs and trying to say things in a lot of different ways, I think that becomes more relevant. And then obviously like AI tools, I tend to be more on the side of like flexible AI tools. So like most often I just tap into the APIs of like Claude and OpenAI, like, you know, GPT 3.5 Turbo, all of that. But there are tools like Toolflow, Copy AI that I'm feeling more bullish on, that I feel like I can recommend because they allow for a lot of flexibility. There's a lot of AI apps that are like one button apps, I'm calling them, where it's like you can't change the prompt. It's for people who want to put in a keyword and get a blog post. I just feel like those will never, ever, no matter how good AI gets, be worth using. So I'm really trying to go toward more of this like bespoke model. So yeah, and then Dovetail is my sleeper right now. I have so many ideas for how to use it more and haven't had enough time to like dig into it, but it's a customer research software, but it's all about like categorizing and visually clustering. And like, I just see like SME, topic taxonomy, all these different ways to use it that I just haven't had a chance to like play with yet, but I'm excited about trying it more.
Love it. One for me, all the ones that you mentioned are ones that I use as well. One for me that is kind of basic, but for me, I use it every single day. It's Snagit. I use it. It's a screenshot tool, screen capture tool. But I think where it's leveling up for me recently is it will automatically sort of tag in the editor where you took that screenshot from. So I automatically have all my screenshots from LinkedIn saved. I automatically have all of my screenshots from a particular website or application saved. I have custom tags for a swipe file. So if I take a screenshot, I tag it as swipe and I can go back and find all my swipes. I can do it for website inspiration, all that type of stuff. So Snagit, super awesome. It's so cheap and you'd be missing out if you don't get it. So I need to get an affiliate link for all these tools is what you're telling me. So awesome. Q&A, I guess we're going to roll into. We've got a grand total of 6 minutes. I saw there were a few in there. I know Ronnie wanted to touch on research as well. So let's cruise into some Q&A here at the end. We got one here. And this comes from the very, very beginning, Jess. How do you secure podcast spots when you're a small startup and only beginning to build a network? Any tips? And it doesn't just have to be Jess.
Great question. That is tough. One is get your pitch right. No one is going to turn down a great story, no matter how small the startup. So if the story and the pitch is spot on, you're much more likely to get on the show that you're trying to get on. I would also try to kind of figure out like, who do I know that knows the host, or who do I know that could like speak for me that might be credible to whoever's running things on this podcast I want to get on. So try to attack it from that angle too. Like, you know, it's always about who you know to get your foot in the door. So those would be my suggestions.
Any others before we move?
+1 to all of that.
All right. Awesome.
Nailed it.
Next one, this one also comes from Ronnie. So how do you align your content team, full-times, contractors to the nuances of how the brand comes to life in your content? Big one there.
Yeah, I am happy to jump in there first. I think that is hard, right? I think you have to have one orchestrator. That's kind of like how I think of myself with all of our contractors. I have somebody helping with email marketing. I have an agency. I'm writing my own stuff. I'm encouraging internal team members to like employees across the company to also write about their functions. So you need like a key orchestrator who understands how to rein everyone in. I use the GPT so that everyone can use that and kind of get some responses, and they can kind of be enabled to get answers about brand or voice or tone, like in their own time. Also with Grammarly, at least internally, you're able to import, I can't remember what it's called, basically like your style guidelines within Grammarly. So you're not only getting like grammar recommendations, but it is giving recommendations to writers that are in accordance with your guidelines and brand, where it's like, oh, we use this word, or this is the name of a feature in your product. It gets capitalized. And that's like a very like granular nuance. But yeah, you really need like some of those tools, and you also need like an orchestrator who can help do that. And like in terms of like creating that alignment. I also am a big believer in when you're working with some of these full-time employees and also contractors from the onstart, editing feedback is critical and giving them an answer as to why you're changing it and like explaining the nuance. So if you put in more of that work on the upfront, kind of explaining some of those nuances, and then they'll catch on and they'll remember it. So it does take a lot more time at the beginning, but then the payoff is going to be huge to ensure that everyone is singing the same tune and aligned with those nuances going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. +1 to everything Chelsea said. I think we went actually a little bit at one point too far in the other direction, had too few freelancers, and then someone gets sick and you're like, oh crap. But I do think that like I err on the side of having fewer freelancers writing more often so that we can invest in them almost up to the level we would a full-time team member in terms of like feedback and training and things like that. We had really incredible and deep content documentation at Gorgias. Shout out Jordan Miller, who built a lot of it with me. Ronnie, I can send you that after. But like, I think we had a style guide, obviously. We had content guidelines, which were based on like Tommy Walker's content code, which I think are really important to explain like things that need to happen in your content, kind of your content team philosophy. It's different to me than a style guide, and you need both. But the thing I think that was actually the most helpful for our freelancers was we had a really deep product intro. And I contend, and I will die on this hill, that when I left Gorgias, we had the best doc on the Gorgias product in our internal Notion of anyone in the company. And I used to think that that was like too much to say. And then I found out some product people were training their new team members on it. And I was like, exactly. But what we did was we used an incredible amount of like toggle levels. So you could always go deeper and get the nuance you needed, but only if you opened them. And that way you could get the high level faster and then go deeper on the things that you needed. But like Jordan did such an incredible job with that doc. To this day, I really think it made a significant impact just on its own in terms of people talking about our product more effectively from a contractor perspective. Also, GPT, great for this, both in figuring out how you've talked about it in the past and creating like calculators, graders, like rate these 10 factors on a scale of 1 to 5. How close did they get?
Amazing. Awesome. Yeah, that's super helpful. Well, shoot, we are at time. We cruised through this. It was a blast for me to chat with all of you and obviously hang out with the folks in the discussion and chat as well. So thanks again for everyone who was able to come and enjoyed it and see it live. If you're watching the recording, thanks for that as well. But I know I had an absolute blast, and thanks for you all for hanging out with me too. All right, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Distribution First, and thank you for listening all the way through. I appreciate you so much. And I hope you're able to apply what you learned in this episode one way or another into your content strategy as well. Speaking of strategy, we have a lot of things going on this year that are going to help you build your brand, 10x your content, and transform the way you do content marketing. Make sure to subscribe to the show and sign up for my newsletter at justinsimon.co so you don't miss a thing. I look forward to serving you in the next episode as well. And until then, take care, and I'll see you next time.